All right, we want to bring in Dr. Ben Carson this morning. He is, of course, the former presidential candidate and a frequent guest on this show. It's great to see you, Doctor. Thanks for coming on.
Good morning. Thank you. Nice to be here.
So President Obama, on his foreign trip meeting with other NATO nations, weighed in on the question of race relations yesterday. Here's part of what he said.
As painful as this week has been, I firmly believe that America is not as divided as some have suggested. That includes protesters. It includes family members who have grave concerns about police conduct. There's unity in recognizing that this is not how we want our communities to operate.
Saying here is the country's really united around the idea that police are racist. Do you think that's the organizing principle of the country?
Well, of course, you know, people recognize that there are problems. There will always be problems as long as there are people. But, you know, in terms of overt racism, that has improved enormously in our country until recently. And there's been an attempt to exacerbate the relationships, not only between the races, but, you know, between the genders, between different income groups, between religious groups, because it is well known that a house divided against itself cannot stand. And those who wish to, quote, put America in its place recognize that there is no external force that's going to bring us down. It will only be through internal strife. And we need kind of leadership that helps to put things in perspective for people. These incidents that occur with the police, they're horrible, some of them. And that's always going to be the case. I'm sorry, until we get to heaven, we're not going to have Shangri-La. But when we take each one of those incidents and we blow it up and magnify it, people begin to make that generalization, which simply is not true. We need to talk about the incredibly wonderful things that police officers do. They take big risk with their lives. Think about their families. Think about the wives and the husbands of the police officers who go out every day and the anxiety that they're experiencing now.
Well, yesterday we saw the president mention also in his speech that it was hard for him to understand or untangle the motivations of this shooter in Dallas. I want to play for you the president's comments, and then I want to play the Dallas police chief who came out a day earlier describing exactly what his motivations were. Listen.
First of all, I think it's very hard to untangle the motives of this shooter. As we've seen in a whole range of incidents with mass shooters, they are, by definition, troubled.
The suspect said he was upset about Black Lives Matter. He said he was upset about the recent police shootings. The suspect said he was upset at white people. The suspect stated he wanted to kill white people, especially white officers.
Dr. Carson, it seems like he was pretty explicit in what he wanted to do. He might have been mentally unstable, but nevertheless, he posted it all over the place. He was pretty clear about it. The president having a difficult time untangling his motives?
Well, you know, perhaps he hasn't been looking at television. You know, he seems to get most of his information that way. Maybe he's been looking at the wrong channels. I don't know. But clearly, this young man had a distorted mentation because he's been listening to the wrong kinds of things and allowing that to affect the way that he thinks. And that's what's happening to a lot of people. They're not necessarily bad people, but, you know, they're not thinking deeply. They're not going to the second and third level and analyzing things. And we need to make sure that we explain. And that's the role of good leadership. Good leadership doesn't make excuses. and it certainly doesn't inflame things. It has people look at things from both sides. And what we need to do is have a police force that gets involved with the community at an early and a consistent stage so that people get to know each other. That's the only thing that's going to solve these kinds of problems.
And speaking of leadership, there's a lot of talk, a lot of buzz about who Donald Trump is thinking about for VP. Now there are some suggestions that he's looking at a retired general, maybe Michael Flynn. You have a little bit of, he's a Democrat, by the way, which could be very interesting. Give us a little bit of inside knowledge. I mean, you have behind-the-scenes look at what's going on in the campaign. Do you think Donald Trump even knows what he's going to do yet?
Well, I can tell you that, you know, this is a very serious matter for him. And he is spending a lot of time talking about these people, discussing it with others, looking at pros and cons, and trying to understand what the ramifications are of each one of these choices. So it's, you know, you're going to hear a lot of things leaked out. You can't help the leaks, quite frankly. But it will be a good choice, that I can guarantee you.
And is Donald Trump going to speak every night of the convention? Do you know? We've heard that. Is that true?
I think that's still in the process of being worked out. I can tell you this, it's going to be an exciting convention. It's going to be riveting. And I don't think you've ever seen anything like this before.
Wow.
I don't think any of us have. It'll be fascinating.
Sure. It's going to be great, in the words of the candidate himself. Great to see you, Doctor.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for being here.
Always a pleasure.